Welcome to the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women using their gifts for God's glory. Know someone who is making an impact for God's kingdom using their gifts, talents, and passions? We'd love to meet them. Send us an email at podcast@giftsforglory.com. That's podcast@gifts4glory.com. And now here is our host, Dave Ebert.
Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gifts for Glory podcast. Really excited to have you along with us. We got a great conversation coming up this evening with Cornbread, the comic. You're really going to enjoy this. I truly believe you're going to enjoy this conversation. Excellent man of God. You might have seen him on the Maurice Brown show when they do the comedians doing Bible study show. He's a phenomenal comedian, and really excited to have him along with us. And I also want to give a shout out to our good friend Felicity Joy, who is our Patreon supporter of the month. She's the host of Simply Felicity and the Black Conservative Female Show, which is available on Facebook and on the Creative Motion Network. I want to thank her for being one of our amazing Patreon supporters. If you would like to support the Gifts for Glory podcast, please consider visiting us at patreon.com/giftsforglory. That's patreon.com/gifts4glory. Now, we are going to transition now over to our Devotions with Dave segment. This one is coming from Philippians 4:4. So our verse of this week is going to be Philippians 4:4. Always be full of joy in the Lord. Again, I say rejoice. Philippians 4:4 from the NLT. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Some translations will say always rejoice in the Lord. I say again, rejoice. But it's the concept of always, meaning there's no exception. The Bible doesn't speak in like generalities where always is kind of an exaggeration. Always means always, in all times, have the joy of the Lord. Now, we talked a little bit last week in the Devotion with Dave segment about joy being deeper and more permanent than happiness. Happiness can be something as simple as eating a piece of chocolate cake. Up here in Chicago, eating a piece of Portillo's chocolate cake, that gives you happiness, but that's fleeting, that passes. You can have the greatest happiness of eating cake, and then you run into a red light, or you get a speeding ticket, or something can make your happiness pass. But the joy, especially joy in the Lord, in fact, joy in the Lord is the only kind of joy because it's the only permanent joy. Joy is more of an anchor. It's more of a rock that you can build your life upon. So here in Philippians, Paul is just telling us to always be full of the joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Feel that joy because the Lord is the source of that joy. And he gives us great gifts like humor, which is why we're celebrating National Humor Month this month of April. So always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice, Philippians 4:4. That is our Devotions with Dave segment. So I hope that speaks to you. I hope that encourages you because joy is so much more important than happiness because that's the rock upon which you build your entire life when you are dedicated to the Lord. So that was our Devotion with Dave segment. Now let's talk a little bit about our guest. Our guest this week is Cornbread Kenny Lee Robinson. He's a comedian based in Virginia, in my old neck of the woods in the western part of Virginia. He's also an ordained minister, a chaplain, a former VDOT engineer, which is the Virginia Department of Transportation engineer. And I said he's a comedian. He's won the Inspirational Country Music Association Comedian of the Year in 2016, 2017, and 2018. I believe he's also nominated for 2020 and 2021. They're going to be doing a dual year nomination process coming up this year. You can find out more at cornbreadthecomic.com, cornbreadthecomic.com. Now, I want to share just a little bit of his comedy with you here tonight as we get started and celebrate National Humor Month. So here is a sample of Cornbread the Comic on the Gifts for Glory podcast.
Okay. Well, now, when I start talking, anytime I'm anywhere, people make some kind of assumptions about me, and I want to set some of you straight on that right off the bat, okay? There's some of you out there right now done made your mind up that I'm illiterate, okay? My mom and dad was married well over 3 weeks before I was born, so I'm not illiterate at all, okay? Now, there's folks that would say that people only married 3 weeks shouldn't be starting a family. But it wasn't like they just met each other and everything. I mean, they'd been first cousins all their lives, so, you know. Now, the kids down there at the trailer park, they made fun of me. They did. They knew I was inbred and corn-fed, and they'd make fun of me. But I had the last laugh on them because, see, being inbred, I was born with 6 toes on each foot. Guess who was the first kid in that trailer park that could count to 22? I come from a really, really big family. I'm one of 15 kids. 10 boys and 6 girls. And this, I'll name them for you there just a second. They say there was Chris and Sammy and Alex and Floyd and Homer and Nugent. That's the 6 sisters. I can't remember all the brothers' names. But we grew up in a little bit town called Big Stone Gap, Virginia. Y'all ever heard of Big Stone Gap, Virginia? It's a little bitty town right there on the Kentucky border. You know, Kentucky being the state what invented the toothbrush. If it had been invented in Virginia, they would call it a teeth brush. But if you saw them Kentucky people, you know what they call it, a toothbrush. They got that one right there in the front. We call that the chameleon tooth. It starts out white, then it becomes sort of yellow, and then green, and then brown, and black. It don't never fall out, it just changes colors, okay? It's a chameleon tooth. Now, how many of y'all believe in love at first sight? Let me tell you, when I saw my wife, we was at church on a Sunday night, and after they have the preaching, they take you over in the fellowship hall. They let you make you a bologna sandwich. I walked in, and I saw her sitting there at the table. Lord, my heart started going pitter-patter, 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 like that. Lord, have mercy. I said, oh, I got to talk to that girl. I walked up to her. I was acting all debonair. I said, my name's Cornbread. What's your name? She said, my name's T-Bug. I said, well, T-Bug, what you been doing today? She said, well, this morning after church, I went home, washed and waxed my new Ford F-150 pickup truck, hooked it up to that bass tracker boat, took it out there on South Holston Lake, caught 3 of the nicest smallmouths you ever did see. Got them marinated and got them flayed out, marinated in the refrigerator, and some buttermilk. Going to fry them up for supper tomorrow night. Folks, I want you to know I dropped to my knees right there in church and proposed and begged that woman to marry me. The woman got a truck, she got a boat, she can fish and cook. You didn't let one like that get away.
So that was a sample of Cornbread, the comic, who now joins us here on the Gifts for Glory podcast. Cornbread, funny stuff. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dave. And matter of fact, it's a very appropriate time. In 3 weeks, we'll celebrate 30 years since I walked into that church and saw that pretty girl sitting there. I don't know that I told it on that part, but the thing that really got me excited is I walked over to talk to her. She had a little bit of mayonnaise right there in the corner of her mouth. And if it hadn't been the first time I'd ever seen her, I was ready to just lick that mayonnaise right off her mouth. You know, but I was afraid the church people might throw me out for doing that. So I didn't lick the mayonnaise off her mouth. But boy, I tell you, I've been a blessed man. 30 years now we've been together. So that was, and that's a true story. I did. That's where I met her at. She was sitting eating a bologna sandwich in church. If you find a woman that goes to church and eats bologna sandwiches, you just go ahead and marry her right then because you got a good one.
Yeah, and as long as your church has bologna in the fellowship hall and not coming from the pulpit, you're good.
That's right. Yeah. Keep the bologna. I bring all the bologna to the pulpit. They don't need the preacher to bring any.
There you go. Well, we are celebrating National History, or not History Month. We're talking
As
about.
old as I am, it's probably History Month too.
Yeah, there you go. So we're talking about comedy, National Humor Month. You're a comedian. You've been doing it for a little while. How long you've been in comedy, and what got you into it?
Okay, I've been doing stand-up comedy for a little over 15 years, and prior to that, I was a motivational speaker. I worked for the Virginia Department of Transportation, and they would have me come and speak to different conferences on construction or road maintenance or Secretary's Day or whatever. And what I found is that most speakers tell 2 jokes to get the audience laughing, and then they bore you for the next 30 to 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So what I figured out to do was tell jokes for 40 minutes and then give them the boring stuff for the last 5. So I got to be real popular. They wanted me to come speak everywhere. And then I was sent up to the D.C. area for 4 months on a temporary assignment, and I found out you could actually take classes in comedian joke writing at the D.C. Improv. So while I was up there on temporary assignment, I took classes, and at the graduation class, the instructor he had me on as the headliner to close out the show. And after it was over, he said, you've got a good feel for comedy. But I'll just be honest with you, before you're going to get good enough that people are going to buy tickets, you're going to need to do about 200 shows to get that good. And so I was getting ready to finish up the temporary assignment and go back to the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. And one of the assistant commissioners stopped me in the hall one day, and she said, why don't you come up here and work for us for a couple years? And I said, Lord, honey, you ain't got enough money in the world to get me to come up here and work at D.C. area for anything more than just temporary. I said, you just ain't got enough money. And I was wrong. Absolutely wrong. Matter of fact, when my wife found out what they was going to pay me to go up there and do some work for them, she packed the bags and sent me on up there. And while I was up there, guess down at Walmart spending all my money.
Yeah.
Woman from the Baptist church. Yeah.
But did she at least tithe first?
Oh yeah. She tithed and then she does a double tithe with eBay right after the tithe for the Lord. Then she does a double tithe to eBay, sometimes a triple tithe to Amazon. I think they just pull up to our front of our house and just they get the cart off before they roll to the front door.
Yeah, people start thinking that you work for Amazon. The truck's there so much.
That's right. I should be buying stock in Amazon. What I should be doing. But anyway, so I started doing comedy, and I found out that I didn't really like the comedy clubs. I did those for 3 years. I did over 200 shows, what they call open mics, where you're cutting your teeth on perfecting your act. And I just knew that wasn't the right environment for me. I just didn't feel comfortable there. And I didn't do the comedy clubs for a couple of years. And I found out about the Christian Comedy Association down in Nashville that Chonda Pierce and some of her contemporaries started doing mostly churches and some corporate work. And I hadn't done any comedy clubs for a couple of years, Dave, and I just had sort of got away from it. And one Sunday morning, I was visiting a church that I didn't usually go to, and the pastor there knew me. He had been to some of my shows, and when he gave the invitation, he actually brought me up front. He said, "The Lord gave me a word for you," and I said, "Okay," and I took it very serious. And this wasn't, something that you normally expect to have happen to you when you're a comedian just visiting a church. I wasn't performing. He said, "The Lord told me to tell you it's okay to go back into comedy clubs." And I was like, "Whoa, really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, God gave me that word for you." I said, I take it. The very next day, I had a comedian friend that's a secular comedian call me, and he said, "Hey, they're doing auditions tonight over at the Liberty Laughs Comedy Club in Fredericksburg, and I think you ought to come." And I went and I auditioned, and the owner of the club came up to me after the audition. He said, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" Because I just did a clean 5 minutes for the audition. He said, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." I didn't do Christian jokes. I just did clean jokes. I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "How could you tell?" He said, "My dad's a preacher." I said, "Wow." He said, you want to open up and host the show this weekend?"
Wow.
And
nice.
So that was my confirmation. If God sends somebody to give you a message, he will find a way to confirm it. Sometimes people tell you stuff and you don't really know, is this from the Lord, or is this something that they just, maybe feel themselves. But, that pastor gave me that word. Next day, a secular comedian invited me to an audition, and then a pastor's son hired me to do a show in his club that weekend. So So I don't do a lot of clubs, but anytime I'm asked, I go. I do clean shows, and invariably when I'm working the door, as people are leaving the comedy club, I get this a lot. People come up to me and they'll go, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I am." And they'll say, "I am too."
Wow.
And it happens. It happens a lot. Just about every club I go to, I get that. So I sort of came full circle. I started in the clubs to get experience. I didn't like it, but then eventually God sent me back, and so I still do them occasionally, but I don't do them a lot.
Now, the people that come out of the clubs and they're like, "Hey, I'm a Christian too." Do you ever get that awkward moment like, "Well, why are you here?"
I did the first time. The first time it happened, I did kind of get that, and then I thought, "Well, I'm here too." But they didn't know that a Christian comedian was going to be on the set that night. And usually I'm the one of, there are 3 or 4 comedians. Usually I'm not the headliner at the club. I'm usually the feature right before the headliner. But I feel like God gives them that boldness.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to tell me they're a Christian. So if God gives them the boldness and the Spirit speaks to them that they want to identify with that, then I know God ain't give up on them yet.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Dave, but I've been a few places over the years where I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And the Holy Spirit always knew where I was at, and I always made sure that I knew that He knew where I was at, and that I didn't have business being there sometimes. So, but yeah, it's good. And God has just really opened a lot of doors for me. He's given me some good mentors over the years that have coached me along in my learning to be a better comedian, learning to be a better Christian. I'm sure you have too. I've worked with some Christian comedians sometimes that didn't always feel like hey, they're. I don't think I would have told that one, but that ain't for me. I can't.
Right.
But sometimes I hear a Christian comedian tell a joke, and I go, I don't believe I would have told that one there, brother. But, that's between them and the Lord, and so they probably hear my jokes, and they probably think the same thing. I think he's funny. That ain't funny. So we're all different. But God, the thing is, Dave, God loves us all.
Yeah.
How we are. He doesn't require us to change before we come to Him. He starts to cleaning it up. Our job is just to catch them and then let Him clean them. And sort of like the fish. All right. And that's why He makes us fishers of men.
Absolutely. We catch them, and then He soaks them after He fillets them. And
that's right. Marinates them a little bit and gets them ready for their next step.
And here's the thing about God: He never there's no limit, and then there's no fish He throws back.
No, they don't throw you back for being too small. So it's good. It's all good. And I've like I say, I've got some fun things. You heard a little bit in the clip you showed about Kentucky. That's actually where I'm headed this weekend. I'm halfway there. I drove down from Virginia to my father-in-law's, and I had dinner with my dad, and then I'm visiting with my father-in-law tonight here in Bristol, Tennessee, and then I'm driving on over to Kentucky tomorrow night. I'll be at one of the churches there in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where my friend Robert G. Lee and June Vaughn are doing a show, and I'm just going to just sit and laugh and be in the audience. I love comedy. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'll be in near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and there's the International Cowboy Church Alliance. That's the group that I'm ordained through, are having their spring roundup. And so it's 3 days of fun and food and good Christian country music, good clean comedy, just a time to fellowship with people from cowboy churches all over the southeastern United States. I think a couple hundred churches in that fellowship. And so there'll be pastors there and cowboy people that just attend cowboy churches, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome. Just Fellowship, food, fun, cowboys. You know,
Yeah.
there's not going to be a vegan buffet out at a cowboy.
No. They actually have the real old Western style chuck wagon with
Ooh, there you go.
big grills, and so we'll have lots of. There will be a lot of. It'll sort of be like the Old Testament where they would sacrifice the cows, and burn them on the altar. We're going to be burning them on the grill. And so there's going to be a lot of barbecue, a lot of burgers, a lot of hot dogs, and all the fixings and some big breakfasts. It'll be a fun time.
And God loves a good barbecue because he always talked about it was a pleasing aroma unto God.
That's right. Just the savor of of burning flesh of the cow or the sheep or the oxen or the goat. Have you ever ate goat?
I not knowingly, I've had goat cheese, but I've never actually had goat.
I had goat for the first time a few years ago. I was visiting with a friend of mine over around Lynchburg, Virginia, and he took me to a restaurant, and they had goat, and he said, "You got to try the goat." So I did, and I didn't think I'd like it. I loved it. It was I ate lamb several times, and I thought it would be similar, and it was somewhat, but I love goat. It was really good, and so you put that on your bucket list there, Dave. You got to eat some goat. All right.
All right. Well, I'll take it from you. I'll take your word for it that it wasn't too bad. And that is my pun for the evening. I hope we don't lose our viewers.
All right.
Well, so I guess the next obvious question is why the name Cornbread? Where did that come from? And
I get that a lot.
Now, is your wife, is her nickname Honey Butters? Because honey butter and cornbread go together, right?
Well, I wanted to call her Corn Muffin, but she didn't go for that. Her nickname has always been T-Bug. Her name's Terry, and she's always been T-Bug from all her relatives. So, but the reason that I came up with Cornbread was when I was taking those classes at the DC Improv, the guy that taught, that was our instructor, name was Matt Kazam. He's out in Vegas. He's a comedian. He was the headliner for several years out at the Riviera before they tore it down and built a new casino on its spot. And Matt toured for 20 years doing all the up and down the coast, doing all the comedy zones and the different comedy clubs before he went to Vegas. And so when he was teaching the class, when the class was over, he had told me that, he thought I had an opportunity to move into comedy. He said, but now one thing you're going to have to do is change your name. And I said, change my name? He said, yeah. He said, there's a really top-notch Canadian comedian by the name of Kenny Robinson. Mm. And he has the website, www.kennyrobinson.com, and he's got all kinds of YouTube videos out there. And his jokes are not the ones that you're going to want people looking for Kenny Robinson, the comedian, to be looking at, because they're going to think that you just tell a lot of F-bombs and a lot of cuss words. And so he said, you're going to have to change your name, because if you come out as a comedian, Kenny Robinson, you're going to be confused with him, and you can't be a Christian. He knew that I wanted to be a Christian comedian. He said, just ain't going to work. And actually, Kenny Robinson is from, he's right around the Detroit area. And we're actually friends on Facebook, and we wish each other happy birthdays, and we like each other's posts and things. He has I don't know if you remember the show that was on PAX a few years ago, maybe 20 years ago, with Billy Ray Cyrus had a show on Doc.
Oh, yeah, Doc.
Remember Doc? Okay. Kenny Robinson, the comedian from Detroit, and he's the Canadian, he was on there. He was a street hustler named Jelly Bean that was always trying to sell fake Rolex watches out of the trunk of his car and stuff like that. But, Kenny and I have become friends, and we correspond on Facebook, and he likes my stuff, and I like his stuff sometimes. And but anyway, so I had an introduction that said, here he is from Big Stone Gap, Virginia. He's inbred. He's corn-fed. He's Kenny Lee Robinson. And we just changed that then from he's inbred, he's corn-fed, he's cornbread. And so that's how it came about. And it's actually been quite a blessing that people can remember that name. Although sometimes they don't always get it right. I'll come back and they'll say, hey, corn dog, I love you when you, or hey, cornflake, come over here a minute. But they don't forget the corn part. They might, maybe it's because my jokes are corny, but anyway, the corn part. They call me cornbread or corn dog or cornflakes, but somehow or another they get the corn part right. So it's been good for people to remember, and it kind of gives you an idea when you hear Cornbread the comic, you kind of know that this is not going to be highbrow, sophisticated, deep thinking comedy. This is just going to be hee-haw level comedy, which I was very pleased a couple years ago when I got the award at the Grand Ole Opry for the 2018 Comedian of the Year, that they actually had 5 of the cast members from the Hee Haw show present me the award. And one of them was Louise Mandrell, that I had the biggest crush on as a kid. And so it was Lulu Roman, who I just think is a great comedian. And so it was quite an honor to have the Hee Haw cast give me the Comedian of the Year award. So they're really nice people.
That's awesome, man. Now we heard how you got into comedy, and the one of the biggest features and one of my favorite parts of the show was hearing people's journey to Christ.
Sure.
So as far back as you want to go, tell us about how you became a Christian. Who was your influence, and just share as much as you want.
All right. I literally was one of those kids that grew up in church. My uncle was a Southern Baptist minister, and my dad was a Sunday school teacher. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. My dad was a deacon. Like I say, my uncle was the pastor of the church we attended. So we went Sunday morning to Sunday school, then stayed for preaching, came back in the evening for something called training union. I don't know if you are familiar with the term training union. It's Sunday night, Sunday school, okay? And then you had Sunday night preaching. Then we came Wednesday night for prayer meeting. Back then, revivals lasted 2 weeks. You would start on a Sunday and run 15 nights through 3 weekends. So revivals would be 2 weeks long. So we basically lived at the church, or I felt like that when I was growing up. So when I was about 7 years old, I was in Sunday school on a Sunday morning, and I just knew I had that realization that all this that I'd been hearing in church was true and was real. I remember my Sunday school teacher's name was Miss Daisy, and I told her, I said, Miss Daisy, I need to get saved. And, well, when class is over, go up and tell your dad, and then when the services has the invitation, then you'll go down front. So that's what I did. I could not wait for my uncle to quit preaching so I could actually go down front. And I remember going down. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember one of the deacons, his name was Fred Carrier, took me to the side and walked me through the Romans Road. And I became a Christian, and I was good until about 14 years old. And around 14 years old, I had a cousin that introduced me to malt duck and Budweiser and marijuana and partying. And so I found out that I could go to his house on weekends and hang out and do all this stuff I shouldn't be doing. And from about 14 to 19, I sort of led a double life. Sometimes I still went to church every time the doors was open, Wednesday night. But if I wasn't at church, I was getting high. I was getting a buzz on. And this lasted until I was about 19, that I led this double life. And when I was 19, it was New Year's Eve, and I was at a New Year's Eve party, and I was drinking, and I just got really convicted. And I knew that the church I was attending at that time, I'd started attending another church called the Fellowship Chapel there in Bristol, Virginia. Pastor was Lester McKinnon. I knew they were having a watch night service. And I left the party before midnight, and I drove over to the church, and I still had beer on my breath, probably had some tequila. Went in, and I went down front, and I rededicated my life, and I've never been the same. God just took away all the desires for the partying and all that away. And so God, he never quit on me. And during that period of time from 14 to 19, God continuously, while I was being this leading double life hypocrite, God continuously chastened me. And that's how I knew I was saved, because, in Hebrews, we read how, that if you don't have chastening, you should be worried, because God chastens us as a father does his sons. And so God continuously chastened me during those years. I didn't get off scot-free. There's an old Southern gospel song that the cathedrals used to sing called "Sin will take you farther than you want to go. It'll cost you more than you want to pay, and it'll keep you longer than you want to stay." And so all that time, I knew God was still chasing after me and bringing me back to himself. So at 19, I rededicated my life, and God's been blessed me and provided for me. And I just am very, very thankful. I'm a very blessed man. A lot of people say I'm a lucky man. Well, I'm a very blessed man. And I understand when you say a lucky man, I know what that means. But I'm a very blessed man.
So at 19, you're walking into this watch night service on New Year's Eve. Was there any weird atmosphere where people are like, "Why is he coming in?" Because you said he probably had beer and tequila.
Oh, yeah. The pastor there at that time was Lester McKinnon, and he had a heart for young people, and he knew that I was leading this double life, and I think that when I came through the door that night and came into the watch night service, he knew that he was probably surprised that I wasn't out partying, which I had been doing, but Lester was a very godly man, and he knew that God was working on me. I'm sure he was praying for me. He was, God just that burning desire that you have that I just couldn't shake it. I had to make things right, and I had to right then. It couldn't wait till Sunday morning. I forget what night of the week it was. It was New Year's Eve. I don't remember what night of the week it was, but it couldn't wait till Sunday morning. I needed to do it right then. So never look back.
And I think that's an important message too for anybody that's listening or watching, that there is no time like the present, because who knows what would have happened if you just walked home and slept it off. You might not have sealed what God was doing. You might have talked yourself out of what God was doing.
Exactly. There's a verse in the Bible says, the Spirit of God will not always dwell with man. There comes a time, I believe, and I'm not a Bible scholar. I read my Bible. I have studied it, but I haven't been to seminary or anything like that. But I do know that like with Pharaoh, it says at first Pharaoh hardened his heart. As we watch the progression of the plagues, then eventually it says, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And that's a scary place to be, to find yourself in a place that the Spirit of God no longer draws you to himself. And I never wanted to get to that point in my life.
Yeah. And the thing is, I know that there are a lot of people, and sometimes I even feel this, where they're intimidated by people who know the Bible front to back, left to right. And then I realized, well, Paul, he didn't cite who wrote it, but he often said it is written, or the scriptures say. Yeah. So it's not about knowing exactly what is where and who said what. That's great and that's valuable, but if you don't know the concept, if you don't know the author, the true author, then none of the knowledge matters.
Exactly right. If you think about it this way. I have a lot of authors that I've read over the years. One of my first favorite authors was Louis L'Amour. I loved as a teenager reading Louis L'Amour westerns. But, I never met Louis L'Amour. I read his books.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you, who the characters were, my favorite characters in the books, but I never knew the author. I never met him, never had the opportunity. And so, that maybe that's, as Christians, it's more important to know the author than to, there's a saying, something to the effect, some people are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, James in the New Testament, James is probably my favorite book because James gives you practical Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Says, if I know a brother has a need of food or clothing or help, and I say, I'll pray for you, that's worthless. I mean, James basically says, he doesn't say this in the King James Version, but you can read it in the Cornbread version. It says, you're a scumbag. You're not a Christian. You're just a holy roller piece of crap. James says you cannot love your brother and not be, you can't say you love your brother and then not do something about it.
Right.
If we, I forget if it's either James or Peter that says, if you say you love your brother and don't do anything to help him, it may have been Paul, you're like a cymbal. You're just making noise and there's nothing to you. And so, I love James because my favorite books to read are James and Proverbs because they give us practical Christianity of how I should live my life, how I should love my neighbor. Jesus, when asked, what is the greatest commandment of all, he gives us, Deuteronomy 6:4-5, love the Lord the Lord God is one. Love the Lord thy God with all thy might, all thy mind, all thy might, all thy strength. And the second is like unto the first from, I think it's Leviticus 19, love thy neighbor as thyself. And so we only do the first half of that of love the God with all our heart, and we don't do the second part of loving our neighbors as ourselves, then, we don't have true, we don't have our spirit right. I'm not saying you're not a Christian, but we don't have our spirit right with what God expects from us. So it's very important that we not only give lip service to God, but we give hand service and we help people.
Yeah. And there's so many that think that saying I'm gonna pray for you is a way to almost protect themselves. Like they don't want to get involved. They're like, I'm gonna pray. It's like a spiritual stiff arm. You run down the field like, I'm gonna just put my hand on you to keep you away from me. Right.
Yeah. It's almost when people. I remember this happening the first time I did this, Dave. This was back when I had hair before I went with the chrome dome look. But I used to go to sport clips. Have you ever been to sport clips?
Mm-hmm.
The MPV treatment, and you get the hot towel on your face and the head massage and all this. And I was at one in Roanoke, Virginia, and I'd been there a number of times. And the lady there knew that I was a Christian that was doing my hair. And she had a brace on her left arm. And I asked her, I said, what happened to your arm? And she said, I don't want to tell you. I said, okay, you don't have to tell me. And she said, well, I want to tell you, but I don't want to tell you. I said, it's fine either way. She said, okay, I got to tell you. She said, I was at a bar and I was drunk and I fell off the mechanical bull and I hurt my arm. And I said, well, did it hurt? She said, not till I sobered up, and it hurt really bad. And so we laughed. And so she finished the haircut. We went back. We did the hot towel treatment, did the head massage. And then she does the thing with the grinder that grinds and gets all the kinks out of your neck and shoulders. And so as I went up to the front to pay, and as I'm paying, the Spirit just spoke to me and said, pray for her. You know, you've had that, you know, it may not be that exact situation, but we all have those situations when God tells us to do something and we're like, we don't say it out loud, but we're thinking, do you mean right now? And they said, yeah, right now. And I'm like, I'm in a sport clips and there's a lot of people sitting around here. And he said, yeah, right now. And I said, all this is taking place inside my head in just about 3 seconds. It didn't take as long for it to happen as it did for me to explain it. But I said, okay, if this goes south, it's on you. Okay. You know, I sort of protected myself. You know, okay, God, I don't think this is a great idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I said, because she had told me that she was going to have surgery coming up on that arm. And I said, can I pray for your arm? And I swear her face lit up like a 200-watt spotlight. And she literally, she almost had tears in her eyes. She said, would you please? And like everybody in the whole sport clips got quiet. I mean, the whole place. And I just reached over and put my hand on her cast. And I said, there's a brace. And I just prayed for her arm. And when I got done, she said, you don't know. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, and I could tell, she didn't say it, but I could tell, I don't think anybody had ever prayed for her before.
Wow.
And I think God wanted her to know that she was special and that he loves her, and he don't care how her arm got hurt, that he's going to be there for her when she has her surgery. And God just needs us to sometimes just listen and do what something I posted this week that said, when God says do something, it means do it right now. And when God says don't do something, it means don't even think about it. And so, you know, I've learned since then to be more sensitive, and that while it's good to pray for people, it's much, much better if we pray with people. You know, so if somebody says, will you pray for me? Rather than say, yes, I'll pray for you, I just pray for them right there, right then, wherever we're at. And I just believe, you know, it may not be your thing, but God's just impressed upon me that if somebody asks you for a prayer, you should do it right then, right there. I don't care where you're at. That's just my philosophy.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that that's in John chapter 14, verse 7 or nothing like that. That's just something that the Spirit has told me to do.
Yeah, I think that as well. And that goes as well on social media. When somebody's saying, I'm going through this, don't just type out, we'll pray for you, or prayers.
Yeah.
I like to, if I have time, obviously, you know, when I'm scrolling Facebook or whatever.
Sure, no, I understand.
You don't always have time to write your paragraph out, but if you can, go ahead and type out a prayer, because it's just like journaling. You know, the prayer has as much effect in text as it does verbalized, because you know, people are going to read it, and you can witness to people who read it who might not otherwise get a chance to hear the gospel.
That's right. I've got one of those war room prayer journals. And I've learned to, when somebody specifically posts on my page, will you pray for this, that I go write it in my prayer journal right then. And 2 or 3 times during the week, I go through my prayer journal and I pray every name and every request out loud specifically. And then when I see something that posts that, you know, the issue's resolved or whatever, then I go back and I mark it as a closing that loop. But I don't write every single prayer request I see on Facebook. But whenever somebody put on my post or on my page to pray for something, it does go in my prayer journal, and it stays there till, and I keep hitting it every couple of days. I go through that prayer journal and hit every name out loud and every request out loud.
Yeah. So we never really, maybe I missed it in the conversation, but when in your story did you decide I'm going to pursue becoming a minister, and you're also you do some chaplain work? When did that come into your story?
Okay, that part, like I say, I've always been involved in church in different roles. I've been a deacon, I've been a trustee, been a church treasurer, and on the finance committees, and headed up deacons committees and deacons boards. But I was down for a year working in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I went down with FEMA and lived there and worked there for a year. And when the year was up, the last week, I was wrapping up all my loose ends to come back. And I'd sort of been out of the comedy now for a year, because this was before COVID had set in. And so I was like, okay, God, I was driving from the motel where I was living over to the office one morning, and I said, okay, God, what's next? Do I need to start, putting some feelers out to people that I'm going to be home in a few weeks, and I need to get back on the circuit doing comedy at churches and corporate events and what? And he said, not right now. And I said, okay. And you know how this is. I mean, God doesn't speak out of a cloud and I hear, a megaphone in my ear or anything like that, but I feel it in my spirit. And this we've been talking back and forth about this for a couple of days. And I was really praying about it, asking him what it is that he wanted me to do. And he showed me an article that was put out on social media by the Barna Research out in California that does a lot of the church research. Sort of like there's a couple other that do it, Pew Research and a couple other Christian organizations that do a lot of the polling. But this particular one was talking about four groups of people that grow up in church. They polled 10,000 people over a number of years that had grown up in church, and for most of their childhood, teenage years, and young adult years, to see where they were at in their faith walk when they moved into their 30s and beyond. And it said that of the 10,000, about 10% are very active, fully committed, what you would call the sold out backbone of churches. That's that 10% that's there when the doors are open. They tithe and give financially. They're involved in ministry, whether it's in the nursery or the food bank or they're teaching a class or a Bible study or whatever. But about 10%. You have about 40% that are church attendees. They give some money. They are somewhat regular. They're there once a month or more, and they occasionally read their Bible, and they are what you would call church goers. And then so that accounts for the top 50% of people that grew up in church. Mm-hmm. What was surprising was the other 50%, not the bottom 50%, but the other 50%. 20% are not in church at all, have been for a long time. And this particular article called them the nuns. They have no religious affiliation. They're not even sure if they believe in God anymore. They have asked, what is your spirituality level at this point in time in your life? And it's basically, it's none. I don't have, I don't go to church. I don't know if I believe in God anymore. I don't believe in God. I'm agnostic. I'm atheist. And then there's a 30% that's somewhere between that and the other 50%. And this particular article called them the Dones, D-O-N-E-S. And it said these people are done with church. They're not done with God. They still believe in God. They still believe they're a Christian, but they've been hurt by church. They don't feel like church is relevant to them. They don't feel a connection. And God said, that's who I want you to minister to. I said, how do I do that, and what does that look like? I said, do you want me to start a church that they would want to come to? And he said, no, there's already enough churches. He said, there's plenty of churches that's got empty seats. If I could get them all back into church, then I wouldn't need you to do what I need you to do.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to minister to people that don't go to church or won't go to church, but they believe in me. Mm-hmm. And I want you to minister to them. So I for about a year, I prayed about this. I talked with a number of pastors and people that I really respect. And I was waiting for somebody to tell me, you can't do that. That ain't a God. God wants them in church. You ain't got no business having anything if they're not in church. Nobody told me that. Of all these people really respect and have high regard for, they said, if God's calling you to do that, that is definitely a need in the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And they said, if God's calling you to do that, that's what you need to do. So for about 8 or 9 months, I struggled with how to go about it. So finally I decided, well, I'll get a minister's license. I can do weddings, I can do funerals, I can do baby dedications. I'll just get a license to be a minister. And I had done a number of shows with the International Cowboy Church Alliance. They're headquartered down in Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay.
And so I contacted them and said, I would like to get my minister's license. And they said, do you want to be ordained? I said, no, I don't want to be ordained. Don't feel like that's my calling. I just want to get a minister's license. They said, okay. So they said, we'll send you an application, fill it out, get some references from pastors that you have sat under for more than 2 years, and pray about it. We'll pray about it, and we'll need to do some interviews with you, and then we'll see about getting you your minister's license. So went through all the process, and when I was doing my interview with them, they said, we've been praying about this, and we really do not want to give you a minister's license. We think you should be ordained. We know what your calling is. We know you. We know the ministry you do. We would like to ordain you into our fellowship and have you be part of our fellowship. They don't call it a denomination because they have people. There's cowboy churches that are charismatic. There's cowboy churches that are Baptist. There are cowboy churches that are non-denominational, and some are in denominations. But they said, we want you to be part of our fellowship as an ordained minister. And so I had to complete a number of Bible exams to see if I needed to do some more training. God gave me wisdom to get through all of those and do very well on the exams. And so I became an ordained minister in the Cowboy Church Alliance, and that's where I'm headed this weekend to do roundup with them. And God just keeps every week. God puts people. It's been amazing. God puts people in my path that I can counsel. I've counseled couples that are having marital problems, people that are just struggling with depression, people just sick, bereavement, deaths in the family, sickness in the family. God just puts people in my path and gives me the opportunity to minister to them. And so while I didn't know what it was going to look like when he told me to do this, he's doing all the heavy lift, and I just show up and do what he tells me.
Yeah. And that's the way it works out, because I think that God knows that if He told us exactly what everything was going to be, it would overwhelm us and
It
scare
would.
us.
It's like, I can't do this, Lord. Yeah.
I mean, I just think about, the Virgin Mary. If she knew exactly what Jesus was going to end up doing, that
Right.
would have scared her to death, to the point she's like, "No, Lord, take that."
Yeah.
There's
Give
plenty
this
of
to
others.
somebody. Yeah. Let somebody else have this honor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you watch The Chosen? Have you watched The
Oh
Chosen?
yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
don't you love that? I think I've watched every episode at least 5 times, and my favorites I've probably watched 9 or 10 times. My father-in-law, he and I, we actually like to just call and talk about our favorite episodes.
Mhm.
An ordained Southern Baptist minister, and a matter of fact, I brought him the new Jerry Jenkins book, the novel. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Yeah.
I brought it to him as with this trip, and I'm going to start reading when I get back. So yeah, I love the lady that plays Mary in that series. That episode 3 from season 2, where she
Mhm.
was like that. Jesus doesn't need her anymore because he's all grown up now, and then she finds out that he still needs his mom.
Yeah.
A really touching episode.
Yeah, I was my wife and I watched it because I watched it ahead of my wife, because she couldn't make it through the back-to-back when they did.
Right. Yeah, they did the 2 and 3. Yeah, the premiere night. Yeah.
She went on to bed, so I watched it live, and then we watched it again together. And I said, after all that healing in that episode that Jesus did for all the Syrians,
Right.
He healed one more person. He healed his mom.
Hey, that is very good. He did. He healed his mom because she was feeling like that, like her job was finished. And yeah, that I love that. I love that. I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write that. That was really good, Dave. I love that.
Yeah.
He did heal her. He did heal her.
Yeah, that's a beautiful show. And if anybody's watching or listening, go check out The Chosen. You can watch it for absolutely free. Download the Chosen app right to your phone. And once you watch it, you're going to want to pay it forward and support the show so that season 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 can all be created. It's the largest crowdfunding project ever done. And It's all been done by people just giving. It's not a charity, so you're not going to get a tax break, but you're going to be using what God's given you to bless other people.
Amen. I buy the DVDs by the dozen for people that aren't as tech savvy to download the app to their phone or tablet. And matter of fact, my father-in-law was telling me before I came on your show, he said, "Hey, I've got a couple extra Chosen DVDs for you to take with you if you want to take them." And I said, "Absolutely. I love giving those. Everybody I've given them to has just absolutely loved them."
Yeah, it's a phenomenal show. It's really well done. And I love the way that they fill. This is not it's saying the Bible's got gaps, but there are certain details that they couldn't record because the Bible,
the Bible would be this thick, this thick. It'd be 7,000 pages because it says in John, if they wrote down every single thing that Jesus did, the world couldn't contain all the books. It just
right.
So, it's a great. It's great because it shows us the Jesus's heart. The actor really captures the heart of Jesus, and then we see that the disciples weren't a bunch of goody two shoes. They not like you and me, Dave. I got the feeling they had their good days, but they sometimes had their bad days. One thing my wife has worked on me over the last 30 years that I used to be bad about. I don't know about you. I used to be real bad about road rage. Somebody cut me off. Oh, I would get so mad, and then I'd have to repent and take back all the things I said, and God's taken that away from me. I drove down today about 4 hours from my home down to Bristol, and it's so much nicer when you don't have road rage. Set your cruise control 72. Don't, nobody cuts you off. They just all pass you and just keep on going. So I don't know if you ever had road rage or not, but I used to be really bad about that. But God's sort of taken that away from me.
Well, I live in Chicago, so that means
Wow.
I have two reasons to fight against the urge of road rage. Number one, fear of God. I want to respect. And the number two thing is you don't know who's got something that's going to hurt you in their vehicle.
Yeah,
I think that's tongue in cheek, but
and y'all have like shooting of the day club up there. It seems like if you watch the news.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you what, you guys do have the best deep dish pizza and the best hot dogs. We held the LOL Gospel Comedy Association conference outside of Chicago down in Harvey in 2018. And I'd never had Chicago deep dish pizza. I'd never had Chicago hot dogs. And I just fell in love with both. Just absolutely loved the food there. It definitely, you got the best.
Yeah. And it's that kind of food that helps guys like me develop that bubble. So when we turn sideways, you see the bubble.
And we know you are on the middle. You're on the level there because your bubble's in the middle. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, Cornbread, I have two segments that we wrap up each show with.
Okay.
The last segment's going to be, I'm going to ask you your wise counsel for somebody that wants to use their gifts for God's glory. But before we get to that segment, the next segment is called The Interrogation. 7 quick questions. They're random. They wouldn't have otherwise fit in the conversation. So here is the interrogation. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is Cornbread's favorite food?
My favorite food, bar none, is hot dogs. There's actually a hot dog documentary that was made like 30 or 40 years ago about all the best hot dogs in stands in America. I could eat hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It is absolutely my favorite food, bar none. And like I say, I love the Chicago hot dogs. I love where we live. We have a place called Sam's Hot Dog that I think makes a really perfect Southern style hot dog, which is a steam bun with a pink Frankfurter with we actually put ketchup on ours down here. I know that's a sin in Chicago. You can be shot by one of those people in Chicago ketchup on a hot dog. I was actually in places in Chicago that has a sign, we do not put ketchup on hot dogs, so don't ask. So I took it as a threat, not as a warning. But yeah, hot dogs. Absolutely.
Can't argue with that. Question number 2. What do you miss most about working full-time for the Virginia Department of Transportation?
The paycheck.
Yeah.
But really, the best thing about working for VDOT is snow removal. You go into sort of a survival mode. You're working 12 hours on, 12 hours off, sometimes longer. The last snow event I was working in Northern Virginia outside of D.C. I was the duty officer or deputy duty officer on the days. You actually have to have 3 duty officers to run the operations center. You got 1,000 snow plows out trying to coordinate it. We were working 7 in the morning till 11 at night. And you literally live on whatever takeout food you can find at 7-Eleven or anywhere else. Believe it or not, I do not drink coffee. I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life. I'm 64 years old. So I live on Diet Mountain Dew, and I know my kidneys are going to pay the price one of these days, but you live on caffeine and sugar. I'm absolutely convinced that caffeine and sugar gets more work done than all the supervisors in America. But snow removal, being in that operation, you're just running on adrenaline. And I know that blizzard of 2010 lasted for 14 days, 42 inches of snow in and around the nation's capital. And we actually had some people that went out and I remember working with one of the superintendents at one of the area headquarters. We had some migrant workers out towards Leesburg, Virginia, that were in a snowdrift of 20-some feet. Their car was buried, and we tried to dig them out with a motor grader. Motor grader couldn't get to them. We tried with a front end loader. We kept just attacking that snowdrift till we finally got in there and got them out. And so things like that. Snow removal. Loved it. Loved working those crazy hours. And snow removal, bar none. That's much fun.
Nice. All right. Question number 3. What's your favorite story in the Bible?
I've got a lot, but the one I'm going to use, one I'm going to say here is the key verse that's on my business cards as a Christian comedian, and that's the story from Genesis chapter 21, verse 6, where the visitors to Abraham and Sarah tell Abraham that Sarah is going to give him a son, and at that time Abraham is 99 and Sarah is 90, and Sarah laughs about it. And in verse 6 of Genesis 21, Sarah says, God has caused me to laugh so that all that hear will laugh with me. It shows you the sense of humor that God has, that he thought it was hilariously funny. I mean, think about it. A 90-year-old woman getting pregnant for the first time from her 99-year-old husband. Favorite Bible story of all.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
All right, question number 4. What's your biggest regret in life?
Biggest regret in life was as I was starting my senior year of high school, I had taken the Armed Forces Aptitude Test, and the guidance counselors at my high school were talking to me about approaching our congressman about an Annapolis appointment. And this was back during that time when I was partying, and they saw the part of me that was going to church every time the doors was open, and they didn't know about all the other. I knew I couldn't pass a drug test to get into Annapolis. So I told them no, thank you. I really regret that I was the hypocrite that I was in high school. If I had not been doing the drugs and the partying and all that, I would have accepted that appointment or pursued that appointment to Annapolis through the congressman, and probably I don't think I would have been a naval officer. I think I would have probably pursued the Marine Corps, but I do regret that I did not let that opportunity slip through my fingers.
Question number 5. When is the last time that you bombed on stage? Assuming that's happened.
Yes, it has happened. It happened a couple of times, but I was up doing I was asked to do it was in Sterling, Virginia, outside of DC, at a place. It was something like, I forget the name. It was some kind of a Irish pub, something like Sean O'Malley's or something like that. And it was a Friday night or a Saturday night, and they were going to have comedians from 8 to 9, and then at 9, then the DJ was going to play, and people would start dancing. And everybody was bombing. And I was the headliner that night. I was going on last. Everybody's bombing, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll be able to save this. I'll be able to pull it off. And so 2 or 3 people in front of me all bombed. My turn came up. I hit the stage. All my jokes that always worked, nothing worked. And it was horrible. Worst, longest 20 minutes of my life. Could not buy a laugh. Came off stage. The club owner called me over, gave me my check, and I was like going to get back to him. I said, that was horrible. I said, I didn't get any laughs. He said, it ain't you. He said, we've tried this once before. I thought we could pull it off. He said, it ain't you. It's not any of the other comedians. He said, they're here to dance. They're here to hook up with somebody, and they're not here for comedy. we'd have been better off to brought y'all guys in for a night that's just comedy and nothing else. And he said, here, keep the check. You did your time. I watched you. You were professional. You didn't bail out. You kept doing what you do. But it was horrible. It was the worst feeling. It gave me a real appreciation for other comedians when they do struggle and have a bad night bombing, to be very sympathetic, very empathetic, and share that story with them. That it happens to everybody, and it does.
Yeah. Question number 6. What's been your proudest moment?
As a comedian or as a person?
Whichever one speaks to you more.
Okay. As a person, it would be the birth of my children, but as a comedian, the proudest moment was the first time that I won an award. Wasn't expecting it. Was honored to be nominated. Really thought it would go to someone else. And I found out that, all those people that come up on the stage and they say, I don't know what to say because I didn't think I was going to win. And you always thought, sure, you knew you was going to win. You're Tom Hanks. Yes, you knew you were going to win Actor of the Year. You really get up there and you don't know what to say. You're just you're proud, but at the same time, you're humbled. That you think, people like what I do. They like what I do. And I remember when I first told my wife I was going to be a comedian. My wife's very super introverted, and she said, people will laugh at you. And I said, that's kind of the ideal. Yeah. If they don't, that's when I'm going to worry, because my wife is the kind that, as an introvert, if she was up speaking and people started laughing at her, she would turn blood red and be very self-conscious about it. And but yeah, so winning that first award was a very proud moment.
Yeah. All right. So, final question of this segment is: book your fantasy show. With whom do you perform, and where do you want it to be?
Oh wow! I know the where. The Grand Ole Opry. I grew up watching all the country music shows on Saturday evening. There was the Porter Wagner show. Had, of course, Dolly Parton was the big draw for Porter Wagner's TV show, but he had a comedian by the name of Speck Rhodes. And even as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, I wanted to be Speck Rhodes. I didn't want to be Porter Wagner singing and all that. I wanted to be the comedian on the Porter Wagner show.
Yeah.
But the Grand Ole Opry would definitely be where. If I can bring people back from the dead, Speck Rhodes, Minnie Pearl, those would be two. Jerry Clower.
Oh, yeah.
I listened growing up as a kid. Jerry Clower and Louis Grizzard, I listened to all their, back then they were 8-track tapes. So yeah, Jerry Clower, Minnie Pearl, Speck Rhodes, Louis Grizzard, and Cornbread on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry.
That would be a sellout show. That would be awesome. And maybe you get to do that on the other side of eternity.
That's right. That'd be great. They've got a bigger stage up there than they do at the Grand Ole Opry. So yeah, that would be fun. Thank you for those are great questions. I love that. That's the first time I've had the interrogation, and I liked it. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you don't have to face any others. But as a married man of 30 years, you've faced quite a few, I'm sure.
Oh yes, and here's what I've learned. I got a great piece of advice from an old married man when I first got married. He said, "Kenny, there's 2 ways you can do things. You can do it the way that she wants to start with, or you can do it the way she wants to eventually. Eventually is never the right choice."
Right. It's like obedience with God. Eventually, you're going to be obedient. Either you do it His way the first time, or you do it eventually His way.
Yeah, it's like the old Fram Oilfield, or you can do it His way now, or you can pay me now, or you can Pay me later.
Exactly. All right. Our final question we ask every interview to wrap up. For anyone that's looking to step up, whether it's in comedy or any other venue, and they want to use their gifts to honor and glorify God, what would your wise counsel be?
You got to start at the bottom. In my opinion, if you look at all the great heroes of the Bible, the ones who were successful came from the very humble beginnings. They came, Jesus born in a stable. David was the shepherd boy. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were carried away as slaves. Joseph was a slave to Potiphar, and then he was in prison. So many people, and I see this in Christian comedy. I see it in Christian country music. I see it in people that want to be in leadership in churches. There's a saying, you want to be in the pulpit before you're ready to stack, but you're not willing to stack chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wise counsel is be willing to start at the bottom.
Yeah.
And learn a servant's heart. I think everybody that wants to use their gifts for God's glory, sometimes they want to use it for their own glory.
Yeah.
And that's why they want to start at the top. That's why they want to, I feel a calling from God. I think Joel Osteen ought to just go ahead and invite me down to Lakewood right now. I'm ready to speak to 27,000, Or maybe Franklin Graham should have me come with him on tour the next time he does a revival. Or, I need to co-write Beth Moore's next book. I want to open up Chonda Pierce's tour. That's not how it goes. Like Joseph was a good servant to Potiphar. Joseph was a perfect prisoner in the prison, and that prepared him to then be leader over Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So my wise counsel is, while you're in the prison, while you're in the slavery or the bondage or the lowly person, the shepherd, if you're not doing your very best there and seeing that God gets the glory for that, then you're not ready to step into the prime light. And I think that's why we have some of the moral failures that we have in the Christian body.
Yeah.
And I'm not casting stones at anybody, because it can happen to any of us. We have to, the devil is coming around like a roaring lion, looking who he may devour. And, pride comes before a fall. So we need to always be on guard to protect ourselves, to not let ourselves get into compromising positions. And I think that when some of these Christian leaders wind up in these compromising positions, it's because they're doing it for their own glory and not God's glory. So start humble and stay humble.
Amen. That's a good word there. Thank you so much for being on here, Cornbread.
Thank you for having me. This has been one of the most fun shows I've done, and I've done a lot of shows. You do a really great show. I from the very beginning, with the music and the countdown clock and good questions, and I love the interrogation and the different parts. You really have a top-notch show, Dave. I really appreciate you bringing me on.
I thank you very much. That's very. I appreciate that. It's fun to do. There are things that this pandemic and this whole thing has done that has allowed me to connect with people I otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, yeah, we're friends on Facebook, but we don't chat. And here is like just hearing you, get to know you. It's been a blessing, and I genuinely appreciate what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have had a wonderful time. I'll watch this again. Tomorrow I'll put it on the phone while I'm driving the rest of the way into Kentucky and listen to it again. It's been a pleasure, Dave. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Cornbread the Comic, everybody. Be sure to check him out online, cornbreadthecomic.com. And we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week. And thanks for checking out the Gifts for Glory podcast.